Hello, and welcome back to Starlight Talks. I'm joined this week by Paul. Thank you for joining us. Next week, Ian and Newton will come back and we'll finally talk about the book. Hopefully that works out better than last time. I do these talks every week, Wednesdays at 7 Pacific Standard Time. So join us next week if you're new. Please check out the website, OurTism.com, where I write a blog about living on the spectrum. You can check out all our programming, life map, and support groups. We have a support group tomorrow for parents. If you'd like to come to that, all that information is at OurTism.com. So thank you, Paul, for joining.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Paul Tokgozoglu, and I host a podcast called Beyond Homo Sapien about human evolution and kind of where the species is going. And something that has significantly impacted my life and something I talk about on the show pretty regularly is high-functioning autism and being on the autism spectrum, which is something that has totally shaped my entire life. And the more I learn about it, the more I realize just how much my entire life has been shaped by my experience of being on the autism spectrum. And I found out that I'm autistic about 2 years ago, honestly. So I kind of discovered it pretty late in my life. I'm 27 right now. And it kind of came as to a whole, as an explanation of sorts for a lot of stuff that was going on in my life. I was having, I'm in the Army actually, and I've been in the Army now for about 5 years. And right when I joined, I started to have all sorts of like mental health conditions that started to kind of rise up. Like I was having panic attacks just about every single day for a while because I was experiencing so much like sensory overwhelm whenever I was at work. And my body started to associate being in the office with being in that state of overload and in that state of defense mode or whatever it is you want to call it. And it started to have like a traumatic effect on my body, where it was almost like anticipating that trauma that was going to happen. And then I'd have a panic attack just about every day. So I started to kind of dig down the rabbit hole of mental health and found out about autism, found out about being on the spectrum. And I'll get into the specifics for sure, but it's kind of me to a degree, kind of my story of figuring this all out as an intro, if that makes sense.
So I want to say hi to Kevin and Richard, who are saying hello in the comments. Thank you for joining us every week. Your story is so interesting because it seems to be like a very common thing for females to have a late diagnosis. So it's also interesting here once in a while the male perspective of that and how like that late diagnosis can really affect people really differently because you don't know why you do certain things. So like there's all these different labels put on it that you're like, okay, that sort of makes sense. And then it doesn't at all make sense. And you keep doing things that are supposed to help it and it doesn't at all help.
Exactly. Yeah. I was homeschooled growing up. So I didn't really ever have a situation where I could have been diagnosed, if that makes sense. And again, it's one of those things like I was mentioning before, where the more that I learn about it, especially once I figured out what it was and that I'm on the spectrum and stuff like that, is when I realized that, oh, that's why I enjoyed being homeschooled so much, because I really just stayed in my basement playing World of Warcraft for most of the day and playing Halo all hours of the night and chilling on my video games and things of that nature. And I never really had much of a social experience until I joined the military. And that was kind of a bit of a shock for sure. Like, it's kind of going from one end of this of things to the other relatively quickly. And I did go to college, but I went to a really small school with only about 1,400 people at the whole college. And again, it's one of those things where I look back on it and it's like, oh yeah, of course I went to that small college. Like, I visited all of these really big schools and they all felt really overwhelming. And I didn't really want to go to any of them because I felt like, something about this place makes me feel weird. I don't like it here, you know? And so, but then I went to this super small private school in middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. And I felt like, this seems like my kind of speed. And very coincidentally enough, it's an excellent school for someone on the spectrum to go to because it's really low pressure and noise at a place like that. So yeah, it's been a journey.
So do you have any childhood stories, like looking back, like, oh, that was such an autistic experience? Like, I remember like going into restaurants and being like, oh, I can't eat here, and people are like, oh, why, do you not like the food? No, it's too loud.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I never really got the social thing, you know? I mean, I had plenty of times where I went to church as a kid. I was really involved in my church, actually. And the social side of things always puzzled me. Like, I just could never get it. I don't know how else to put it. Like, it was like whenever people were gathering with each other and people were having conversations with one another, I could just never, I always knew that there was something that I was missing to the equation, but I never knew what it was. I never understood like why people were able to connect so easily, and I never understood why people enjoyed talking about like the little things, like the small talk kind of stuff. I never understood. You know, I always just wanted to talk to people about World of Warcraft and Warhammer models and fantasy books I was reading and Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. I never really understood like why anyone would be interested in talking about anything else. You know what I mean? Or anything that was not like that really crazy niche interest, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And really it was just my entire life. I mean, still to this day, just marked by obsessions with things. You know, like as a kid, I was just obsessed with. Since I was born, I've just been obsessed. Like I'd say the most autistic thing about me, just my obsession with whatever it is that I'm currently interested in. Like when I was a little kid, it was Legos. Then it was Warhammer models. Then it was video games. Then it was this, that, and the other thing. You know what I mean? And still to this day, I'm just obsessed with different things. I think I've just figured out how to channel it in a more healthy behavior or different, in a way that could actually help me make a living and, run a business and stuff like that, versus just being a guy who knows a lot about very weird things. Although I'm definitely still that. I definitely still know a lot about very weird things and most people don't care about.
Well, what I realized as a kid, I used special interests because I didn't have friends, so I wasn't going to birthday parties. I wasn't going to after school activities because those were too overwhelming. So instead of being depressed and sad all the time, I filled that time with being obsessed with something, whether it was reading, whether it was writing, or being on the computer, or whatever that subject was I wanted to learn about. And then it filled my time and I got something out of it rather than being like sitting and thinking about, oh, I don't have any friends and like stuff that other people worried about. And it was like a protection. Like I was obsessed with reading for so long, and I would bring my books literally everywhere and like hug them in front of me like a shield. And I would only talk about my books. And then when I trusted someone after that conversation, then I would move on from it and talk about something more vulnerable. But you had to gain that trust first.
Yes. And that's the thing that I've seen with a lot of folks like you and me is this idea that we have all of the emotions and all of the feelings and all of the thoughts and experiences that everyone else has. we just might be a little bit more guarded about that, especially before you are a little bit more developed in your own kind of awareness and your own emotional intelligence. And that takes a lot of hard work for people like you and me to do, but that doesn't mean that those things aren't there. And in fact, quite the opposite. Oftentimes, just as the noises in our world are super overwhelming to us, our emotions can be just as overwhelming, and our emotions can be just as extreme, if that makes sense. Or not, extreme is maybe a bad word, just as like it's almost like we're more emotional is what I'm trying to say than maybe a regular person. But it takes some time to realize that. It takes some time to realize just how emotional you are, because it's not really something that you naturally connect with as someone who's on the spectrum. You naturally don't have that ability to connect with yourself. And that's a big part of my journey. So learning how to connect with myself emotionally. And it led down a crazy road for sure. And but it's good. It's all good.
Yeah. The emotion part of it, like I had emotion, but I didn't know how to express it. Like I remember now I can mask really well, where it's like I don't even have to think about it. It's so ingrained, but I had to actually learn that. And I remember being at Disneyland in like 5th grade or something when I was young, and my mom kept asking me, "Are you having fun? Are you having fun?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm having fun." Why do you keep asking me that? It's because I wasn't smiling, and someone like literally came up to me like, "Why don't you smile when you're happy?" I'm like, "That's what you're supposed to do." And then I went, "I'm having fun." And then people started believing I was having fun, so I was like, "Oh."
I know, it's crazy. It's crazy, honestly. Like when you start to have these experiences, and when these mirror neurons in your brain start to kick in a little bit more, when you get a little further and further out of this shutdown defense mode that we kind of gravitate into, it's amazing what happens. But yeah, you start to see more like what it's like to experience the real world, and again, like for me, how like I'm constantly surprised now that I know about this stuff, and I have a lot of systems and stuff and habits in place that I do, which I obsess over just as much as I obsess over everything else. Like these habits and things that I do to keep like the pressure and noise in my life really low. And it's profound to me. The further I get out of this defense mode, shutdown state, the more that my world opens up, and the more that I realize, oh my God, I am so sensitive. Like I'm so ridiculously There we go. There you go. I got you again.
Okay. Video will resume in a minute. I'm still here.
I'm here too. Can you hear me?
You're back. Okay, I'm back.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Awesome.
In there.
But yeah, it's crazy how sensitive we are. You know what I mean? And it's not something you realize right away. But once you do, it's you know what I mean? It really is it's pretty absurd when you start to realize just how special you are, and how like how much like I don't know how to say, but how different our experience can be, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we got a comment. Great stuff. You guys, thank you for sharing. So you use the word regular person. I understand the context. It still kind of made me feel a bit sad.
Oh, I don't mean regular person like that. I mean more like the muggles. I don't know how I use that word. Like I don't know
neurotypical or
neurotypical is what I mean. But you know what I mean. I don't mean regular to say like, oh, we are less than or anything. Like no, if anything, I personally think autism is a superpower when you learn how to channel it correctly. So yeah, I'm thinking about it more in terms of like, yeah, the muggles. I don't know everyone else, the others.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
so bringing up language, a lot of people get offended by different words. And there's people who like, I want to be called autistic. I want to be called a person with autism. For me, like, I love all the different ways that you can describe someone as having autism. So I'm fine with all of them, but I get why you would prefer different things. Like, especially if you have been mistreated in the past. So I really leave it up to like the person, and I ask them, what do you prefer, and that kind of thing. But like, language is important, and if it bothers you, you should definitely say something and be aware of that.
Totally agree. Totally with you. Totally with you. Especially folks like you and I are a bit more sensitive, and that's cool. That's part of it. Like for me, a big part of my kind of developing and getting out of defense mode and learning all this stuff about myself was really just focusing on self-love and loving and accepting myself and learning how, because I used to be very critical on myself. I used to be so critical on everything that was happening in my world because in my mind, I was feeling like, oh, I can't match up with the expectations of the world. I'm somehow lesser than, or like I cannot achieve this life that I am trying to create and stuff like that. And I was super critical on myself. And at the time I was married actually to a woman, and I'm actually gay, and that's not something that was working out because I was so disconnected from my own emotions that I didn't even realize that I was gay, and I wasn't even able to feel my sexual emotions, and I wasn't able to connect with that part of myself. So it wasn't until that I did a lot of work around emotional intelligence, and again this idea of self-love and acceptance, and like accepting myself just the way that I was, that was a big part of it. And once I kind of unlocked that emotional aspect of myself, and again, and most importantly, like got out of defense mode, got out of overwhelm, put in place a lot of habits like drinking a ton of water, going for walks every day, meditating, eating well, and really just like taking care of myself physically. That's when my emotions started to kind of come online. And I realized why my marriage to a woman wasn't working out. It was because I'm gay, and that's cool. That's cool. I didn't know. And that's a big part of like what I guess I'm trying to do is I want to spread a little bit of awareness that it's possible for an autistic person such as myself to be so disconnected from their emotions that they're not even really able to feel their own sexuality. And I feel like that is something that a lot of autistic folks struggle with, is not necessarily, not to say that they're gay and they don't know it, but more just that they don't understand just how disconnected they are, if that makes sense. And once you do figure that out, the whole world opens up to you. And it really is a very profound and beautiful thing. And it's worth fighting for. You know what I mean? It's worth it to feel your emotions, for sure.
The further I get out of defense mode, the more I realize I keep putting up boundaries that don't need to be there. I'm like, I thought I knocked them all down, but there's still more. And I'm finding out more and more about myself and my capabilities. And it's a really cool journey. And for me, I'm asexual, which is very stereotypical for those on the spectrum, but I've never met another asexual autistic person. So, and that was hard for me to figure out because it's not really talked about. So like when people, like I remember people talking about, oh, this is sexy to me, and like nothing turned me on. So I was like, I don't understand what is sexy in that word, and I still don't, which makes sense because I'm asexual.
Yeah.
And so like that's where I identify, and that was like, it just like wasn't ever brought up what that was and explained to me. So I was like, I like all people equally. So maybe I'm pan or bi, which is like the total opposite of what I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's a lack of education in our society in general. And for folks like us, it's very, we gravitate towards because you don't know any better, obviously, especially when you're young and you're still figuring this stuff out. You don't know any better other than, like, for me, I just assumed that I was straight. And here's the thing that I realized, and this was the thing that was key for me, again, going back to how disconnected I really was from my emotions. It's that it's not that I feel nothing towards women. I do like I have a functioning reproductive system. You know, I'm a healthy adult male, and like everything is online and it all works. But that, and I have feelings of like friendship for women, and I also have feelings for men. And I didn't realize that there's a difference between a functioning reproductive system and friendship versus like actual sexual arousal and being, you know, passionate with someone, if that makes sense. And that, or that there's a difference between romantic feelings and friendship, if that makes sense. But they're still both powerful emotions. Like the feelings I have for the women in my life that I'm really good friends with, including my former wife, who now we're just very good friends. We're just really good friends because she totally understands, thankfully. And yeah, that our relationship is one of passionate friendship, but that's very different than the romantic emotions, the romantic feelings. You know what I mean? And the fact that, and it was very hard for me to put those all together and to understand that, like, you know, there's a difference. And just because you feel something towards women doesn't mean that it's romantic. You know what I mean? And that, again, going back, it's the whole idea that society does not educate you on this, especially when you're someone like me who gravitates already towards not being very connected with my emotions. It's like no one ever sat me down and was like, listen, son, there's a chance you're gay. Like, just putting it out there. Like, you might be gay, and just because you have emotions towards women doesn't mean that you're straight. Okay, got it? All right. So thumbs up. You know what I mean? Like, no, it never happens. It's like you're assumed straight unless proven otherwise, instead of it just being open.
Even with things that were explained to me, like I felt like they weren't fully explained, or like people didn't understand them and still taught them to me. Like one I remember really clearly is everyone said, you smile when you're happy, you cry when you're sad, but that's not true. People laugh at funerals because they're uncomfortable. Like, so then I was taking that and misreading everything. So like these rules aren't set in stone, but if they went like, oh, there's emotion and everyone experienced it differently, like then I would like be way more understanding. But like people try to make it really simple for kids, and I feel like doing that, you're dumbing the kids down and like helping them make more mistakes.
Yeah. Yes, I totally agree. And the other thing too is that oftentimes there's all sorts of emotions that are never talked about. Mm-hmm. That like there's so many, you know what I mean? There's so many different ones. And if you're like me, I had to learn how to connect with all of those individually. Like I still remember the very first time that I felt jealous. And it wasn't until, honestly, it wasn't that long ago because once I kind of got out of this defense mode, shutdown state where I couldn't really connect with myself, I couldn't really feel. And if you want me to explain the whole defense mode thing, I will. I'm thinking that the people watching already have some idea of what I'm talking about. But if you want me to dive into that more, just let me know. But
if you want to learn more about defense mode, I did a live stream with Danny Rady. You can go to the OurTism Facebook page, click on videos, and we did the A&E process. So the AE process, I think it's called. So you can look there, and it goes into a lot of detail about that.
Yeah, Danny's the man. He's the one who helped me understand all this, and that's how we connected, is through the Asperger Experts group, I think. But yeah,
there's a really cool comment. I think it was from my physics teacher, Miss Eastwood. As a teenager, I didn't understand what fun felt like when people would ask me if I wasn't having fun, I'd say, no, it's not about fun. And then people would ask me why I kept doing whatever it was if I wasn't having fun. And I was so confused. Of course, I was going to keep doing it, but I didn't know why either. Now I know I was having fun, but in me, fun definitely isn't the same as for most other people.
Yes.
I have a similar story. Like, I didn't understand the difference between me having fun and my parents having fun when I was little, where like my dad really loved sports. And so he wanted me to do sports and he got so excited about it. And now I know I'm an empath and was picking up on his feelings. So like as soon as he wasn't there, I was like, this sucks. But I didn't understand why.
Yeah.
And so I kept pursuing that. And now, and it wasn't until like I think there were 2 or 3 practices a week where I was like, I can't do this. This isn't fun. Yeah. I was like, I need to stop. It took me a while to understand, like when someone else is excited doesn't mean I have to be excited.
Yeah, that's huge. It's huge. And there's someone that like you and everyone watching would probably really enjoy looking up, especially if you're like me and you're getting into like entrepreneurship or running a business. There's a guy named Alex Sharfen. I'll send you his name so you can look him up. Alex Sharfen, Charfen. And this dude, he's run like many multi-million-dollar companies, and he's diagnosed as being on the spectrum. And he's awesome. He's like someone who really helped me a lot when I was going through a lot of this, because he kind of mentored me for a while. And he has a theory about people like us. He calls it the entrepreneurial personality type, or the evolutionary hunter is the other term he uses. And his theory is that for millions and millions of years, we know mankind existed in tribal societies, and that there are different roles in the tribal societies, and that different people gravitated towards different roles. And that was the human experience for millions of years, was that sort of a thing. And that basically that in that society, a certain segment of the population would be the hunters or the warriors, or the ones who would go out and kill woolly mammoths in search of food, and or defend the village if shit went down or something like that. And that these people, their descendants, are still with us today. And his theory is that folks such as you and I are the descendants of those hunters, and that part of the reason why we sometimes have difficulty in today's world is because it's so different from the tribal society that we are kind of genetically hardwired to experience. And the reason I bring this up is because he talks about the concept of momentum, and that for folks that he would define as the evolutionary hunter, the entrepreneurial personality type, or whatever verbiage you want to use, we don't really feel fun. We feel momentum. Like for us, that's fun. And that's something I totally relate with momentum. In other words, having some sort of a goal, having some sort of a thing that you are obsessed with, and moving towards that thing, and being in the chase, being on the hunt of that thing. Being like, for me, it's podcasting these days, and like I do my podcast every single day, and I'm obsessed with it and all the things that I'm into. And his argument is that this is why people like me gravitate towards obsession, because we, back in, millions and millions of years ago, we were obsessed with killing the woolly mammoth and bringing it back to the tribe so everyone could eat. And that takes a level of focus that most people don't have. And that's why, like, whenever something stops me from doing my podcast, whenever something is like getting in my way, I'm genetically hardwired to be like, this thing's got to go. I've got to move forward. I've got to, and you feel like for me, I feel a sense of like panic and anxiety whenever I'm not moving towards my thing. Whatever my thing is, I feel like the shutdown comes in, the constraint comes in, and I feel like, oh my God, this is a matter of life and death. I have to finish my podcast. I have to get this done. And it's because of this is the theory. I'm not saying this is 100% scientific truth, of course, but it's a theory. You know what I mean? And for me, it's a really helpful theory because I totally relate with that. That like I don't really feel fun. I feel momentum. I feel like even when I'm hanging out with my friends, I don't really have like we have fun, but the reason I'm having fun is because I'm in momentum towards my goal of having great friends and having a good time. You know what I mean? And for me, that's like a big thing. It's a big deal. So I wanted to share that because for me, it makes a lot of sense of how this all came to be, how this all works. But yeah, fascinating stuff. He's the one who got me to drink a lot of water too. And that's really important.
There's a lot of dehydrated people in the world that just drink more water. Would fix
For real. Water, drinking more water is what got me out of defense mode. Seriously, like drinking like gallons of water a day is what really did it for me. Because I was walking around in this super dehydrated state and I was super sensitive to that experience of being really dehydrated and never really having that fulfillment that my body deeply craved of being like totally hydrated. And it wasn't until I started drinking seriously like 2 gallons of water a day, if not a little more, that's when I started to feel my emotions. That's when I finally stopped having like panic attacks and stuff like that, was when I drank a ton of water. And I quit coffee for a while too. I didn't drink coffee for like 6 months. So I had been drinking coffee for literally like 6 or 7 years, like crazy, because I was obsessed with coffee.
I remember someone telling me when I was little that if you eat or drink when you're upset, that your body recognizes that it has the necessities and it recognizes it doesn't need to panic anymore.
Yep.
So obviously water is the better option of the two. So I drink, that's why people drink tea and drink, hot chocolate and coffee when they're upset. Like water probably is your best option. So like the tea or the water. And so I remember doing that for the first time and it really calmed my body down instantly. I was like, what? It's amazing.
Huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. And it's important for anyone, for neurotypical people too. But for us, it is like life or death. Like for me, it literally is the difference between being in defense mode and not being able to feel my emotions versus having a fulfilled life. and yeah, it's something that works for me. And I do this. This is like part of the many little habits that I obsess over to keep myself out of defense mode. Is when I wake up, I just chug like as much water as I possibly can. Like the first thing you do in your day. Like anyone listening, give that a try. Just as soon as you wake up, brush your teeth so you don't have all nastiness in your mouth. Brush your teeth, and then right away, just chug like as much water as you possibly can. Not like a little sip, but literally like as much water as you can. Just chug, because what it does is it tells your body there's water here. There's water around. You don't need to panic, because that's part of it, is that when you're not getting enough water and when you are not drinking enough water, like if you're just taking like little sips here and there, that's why chugging is a very, like you said, it's a therapeutic thing, because your body feels like, there's water. Yes, sweet. I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about getting water today, and it's huge. So if you do that like first thing in the morning, seriously, like changes, at least for me, changes the course of my day. It's huge.
We got a question from Alyssa Eastvet. She said, my son is 6 and has an ASD diagnosis. Unlike me, although I'm pretty sure I'm probably on the spectrum too. And he's definitely very disconnected from his emotions, and they all manifest as anger. Based on your experience, what would have helped you connect with your emotions at a younger age? So that to me is definitely defense mode. I describe being in defense mode the years I experienced that as my Dalek years. If you don't know what a Dalek is, it's a character from Doctor Who that the species of Daleks have removed all emotion and all they feel is hatred, and so they're always in a state of war where they need to fight. And that's what defense mode does, is it actually tells you that even inanimate objects such as the too bright lights are a threat to your life, and that it can warp anything that my parents said to me. So like say my parents said like, oh, I wish you would do your homework, or be like, oh, my mom really wants a kid that's perfect that isn't me, and she doesn't know who I am, that I'm not capable of that. And it would make me so angry when she was just like, do your homework, that'd be nice. No, I'll help you with it. And she was like maybe even giving me a compliment, like, we get this done, then we can go hang out and have fun. You can do your paintings and you can read and we can hang out together and it'll be great,
Yeah.
But I took that as she's attacking me, and that's what defense mode does. And it's similar to depression, but I would say it manifests more in anger rather than sadness. So it's a state of mind that's very consistent. And so you need to break that narrative that the world is against them. And the best way to do that is, I think, to cry with them, to get angry with them at the same things, to say I love you, and validate them as much as you can. Like, oh, I'm sorry you're going through this. That really sucks that people are mistreating you. And that will break that narrative that the world is against them, because you can't argue with someone going, oh, it sucks that you feel that way. It really sucks. I'm sorry. Let me help you through this.
Yeah.
That would shock me out of it for a few seconds. And then it's also a very addictive state of mind. So you come out of it and then you go back in, and you come out of it and you experience emotion and you experience the world, and it's really scary. So you go back in. But the more you come out of it, the longer you are able to stay out of it. So it was like, I'm out for a few minutes, then I'm out for a few hours and a few days. And then now when I go back in, it's like maybe a few days or maybe even a few seconds sometimes, where at first I'd go back in, it'd be months.
Yeah, for sure. It's huge. And and on the subject of like something that would have helped me when I was younger and things of that nature. And first of all, I mean, obviously, like when I decided to change my life and heal and stuff like that, I was like, I wanted to, and then I got obsessed with fixing myself, basically. Not that I was broken, but more like, healing, I guess a better way to put it. I got obsessed with getting to where I am today. And, but obviously if you're 6 years old, it's different, right? Because they might not have that ability to conceptualize that sort of thing. And, but I think that honestly, understanding that, like Chloe was saying, defense mode is certainly what's going on here. And that defense mode is a physiological thing. That's the thing about it. It's based on how the person is physically feeling, and the fact that they are overwhelmed by their emotions and also by the outside world. But honestly, mostly your internal world. That's the kind of kicker about it, is the whole sensory overwhelm thing is certainly real and certainly something that I deal with every single day. But it is magnified based off of your internal state. So the reason why the external world was so overwhelming to me was because I was already overwhelmed internally. So what I'm saying is there's certain things you can do that will trick them or kind of get them out of defense mode physiologically, that they don't even have to necessarily know that you're doing. Stuff like drinking more water, not having soda in the house.
Having a healthy body leads to a healthy mind.
Yes, exactly. So like focus on those things that you can control as the parent. Like just don't have soda in the house. Don't buy junk food. Don't have a very healthy diet. Drink lots of water. Help them get outside for a quick walk every day. You know what I mean? Like these things are going to be absolutely life-changing. And you don't realize it until you start to do it and you realize how life-changing it is. Things of that nature. And just in general, like staying away from soda. You understand what I'm saying. And also on the topic of anger specifically, anger is like all emotions are just energy, and that energy has to go somewhere. And what I found with me with anger, honestly, punching pillows is seriously so good for me. Like anytime I get angry, anytime I feel the emotion of anger, I grab a pillow and I start punching it. And that's it. And it's, you know what I mean? Like it's
stim a lot. If you don't know what stimming is, it's a repetitive motion, such as hand flapping, jumping, spinning, that regulates emotion. So if he needs to regulate emotion, let him run around in circles, let him hang upside down, let him swing, let him jump. If there's not a safe place to do that, create a safe place to do that. Like I've had someone like, oh, my kid's throwing things and breaking them. I'm like, then make sure every time he does it, hand him something soft he can throw, put him in a room where he can throw it against a wall or take it outside, say, this is what you do. When you feel this, you throw, because he's going to have to throw.
Yeah.
That's just
exactly. And the thing is, the reason is that if you tell him to stop, if you tell him don't do that, which might be what you want to do, like you might say like, oh, I wish this would stop. I wish this would go away. But then what you're going to do is you're encouraging them to further bury their emotions and not feel what they're feeling. Because obviously he's feeling angry for whatever reason. So it's healthy for long-term growth if you say to the person, hey, what you're feeling is called anger, and it's a normal emotion that people feel. And that's what anger feels like. Here's what we do when we're angry. We run around in the yard for 30 minutes and we get all that energy out. Or here's a pillow. Here's a huge mountain of pillows. Go to town whacking these pillows. You don't hit the wall. You don't hit this. You don't hit that. But these things you can hit. You can hit them all you want. You know what I mean? Things like that. Or get a punching bag. Punching bag is awesome. You know, seriously. Like
with them when they're doing it.
Yeah.
Spin, jump with them, punch with them, throw with them.
Yes, exactly.
They would love that. And then they'll bond with you and trust you and connect with you. The more you join in on the kids' world, the more they'll want to join you in your world. And that's how I built trust with my parents is we did that stuff together.
It's huge. It's a brilliant way to put it. And yeah, and just I guess the overall thing is just understand again that it's a physiological thing that's happening with their body. It's something going on inside their physical body, and that the energy of anger is not going anywhere. It's not just going to disappear. It has to be expressed somehow. And there's healthy ways that you can express anger.
Oh,
the sound just went.
It did. There's this really cute comment we got from Kevin he said, gender culture is often debated. For example, I have a habit of putting the seat down on the toilet that is shareable with other family members. Like little things like that can make people so happy. Something so small like that can make life so much easier for another person. Yeah. When you just think about somebody else.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing. We due to kind of having an underdeveloped theory of mind, it's easy for us to forget that other people are people too. And that was a huge part too for me of my my development.
So my son meets any answer that isn't yes with crying, yelling, running away. So if you're saying no, I think we touched on this a little, stop saying no and instead replace it with, well, we're doing this instead. Like give something else we're going to do. Like I remember my little cousin, no matter where we were in the world, we'd be on vacation halfway across the world. And if anyone asked him, where do you want to go? Rocket Ship Park. Because that was where he always wanted to go. And if you said no, he was done for the day. He was like, that's where I want to go. You asked me and I told you. But if we said, we're going to the aquarium today, do you want to go to there? He'd be like, yeah. You know, like give them something else that they can look forward to and replace. Because sometimes taking something away that they're really excited about is too much. Where like, and that transition is really hard. So if you're like, so instead of saying no, phrase it in another way where you're not saying, I'm taking this away from you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I love that answer. It's perfect. And the one thing too that I've realized is a lot of folks on the spectrum don't do well with no. Don't do well with the word no. And like when I was growing up, and again, this is another one of those things that you asked me, like back in childhood, I now see this as a very autistic thing. My mom would always tell me, like, Paul, when I give you an inch, you take a mile. Like I can't give you anything because you just take more. You just like whatever we give you, you take advantage of it. That was kind of what I was told a lot was, and that was me as a little kid. Like my mom would give me an inch and I would take, a couple miles of her favor, if that makes sense. And obviously, as a kid, it's hard. Like if you're a parent and you have a kid who's on the spectrum, like obviously that's something for you to sorry, are you back?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, good. So like what I'm trying to say is that yeah, when you're a kid, it's really discouraging and kind of depressing because you're like, oh man, this kid has some issues, especially around the word no. And again, it's that matter of learning how to channel that into some positive directions. Because like there's many places in life, and this is what I've found, there's many places in life where not taking no for an answer is a great quality. Like me, I'm starting businesses now and I have a marketing agency. And like, you know, like quitting for me is not an option because I don't take no. You know what I mean? So like I'm never gonna let anyone tell me no to my goals. You know what I mean? And I'm not gonna quit, is what I'm saying. So in that case, not taking no for an answer is a great quality. Or in sports, for example, like not taking no, like if the opponent is kind of the thing that is telling you no, like you're not going to win, and the person refuses to take no for an answer, and they win and they work really hard, like that's a positive way to look at it. You know what I mean? So again, it's that whole thing of like, okay, how can I take this quality of this person not taking no for an answer and teach them how to apply that in their life in ways that will be great? Like that person's probably going to do really well at sports, perhaps. You know what I mean? Because they have that determination that it takes to go after tough things. You know what I mean? And it's just a matter of channeling it in a healthy direction instead of telling them like, you know, I think you get what I'm saying. I'm random.
Reframing, taking a negative and looking at it in a positive way.
Yeah, exactly. It's huge. Because I think that for so many parents with kids on the spectrum, it's very depressing because they think like, oh, my kid's always going to have trouble. But the thing is that, again, like you can find ways to channel that in a really positive direction. Like I know so many entrepreneurs running really successful businesses who are diagnosed as being on the spectrum. But it's that same thing because it's a mindset. That mindset of being obsessed with something is excellent in business because then you become the expert and everyone wants to pay you for because you know how to code artificial intelligence or something like that. You know what I mean? Like just look at Elon Musk. Like listen to a few interviews with Elon Musk and tell me he's neurotypical, because he's not. He's 100% on the spectrum. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things where if you learn how to channel it in a positive direction, it'll be great. You know, you just got to learn how to make that switch, and it's hard. It can be hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people, I think, that are on the spectrum that don't know because they were able to take what other people thought were struggles or mishaps or whatever, and they took them and used them to their strength and went, I'm going to take this other route and do it. And so they never, because like people look for this answer when there is a problem, right? When there's no problems, like why do I need to know that I'm on the spectrum? And they don't look for that diagnosis. So like I've had, like when I've talked about being on the spectrum, I've had people go, can you experience that without having autism? And I'm like, they're one step away from just being like, do I have autism?
Yeah, I know. I've been there too. And frankly, I think it's more common than we might think. I think there's a lot of undiagnosed autism out there. And I think it's okay. Like I think that it's part of the conversation is that it's okay to be autistic. Like again, it's I've been in the military now for a couple of years, and obviously I've had a bit of a challenging time, but learning all these coping mechanisms have helped a lot. But a lot of people who are in the military, especially like special forces, are, I would say, probably on the spectrum. You know what I mean? Because again, it's that level of determination that will drive you forward to do these things that are extremely challenging. And you might not be great at the, company picnic, or you might not be great at the social aspect of things, but you're really good at, obsessing over whatever it is you're obsessed with. You know what I mean? And eventually you can find ways that can really carry you forward in your life. And yeah, and it'll be great. It'll just, like for me, honestly, like I know I mentioned Elon Musk earlier, but he was a huge inspiration for me because I read his biography and I watched a bunch of interviews with him, and I right away I thought like, oh my God, he's like me. Like he sounds exactly like me. Especially if you read his biography, he like 100% is on the spectrum for sure. And you know what I mean? And for me, it's so motivating. It's so like, it's really good. It makes me feel really good because I know that I can achieve great things. And you have to find a great way to channel it in your life.
Yeah, I didn't realize how important it was, that representation of someone like me, like an autistic person or a gay person or a minority, was in film or represented in like someone talking about it who's a celebrity, until I saw a movie that had, like, I thought I related to characters, and then I saw a character that wasn't 100% neurotypical and had this similar struggles to me, and it's still my favorite movie. It's called Phoebe in Wonderland, and like there's this like beautiful scene where they're explaining the rules of the classroom, and she's like, the example is like, good job Jenny does this, and so you want to be like, good job Jenny, and so good job Jenny only asks questions when it's time for asking questions, and she raises her hand. How do you know when it's time for asking questions? What did I just say? And then everyone's like, you only ask questions when it's time for, and like the entire class got it. And I was like, that was me. Like, I didn't even know rules existed. Yeah. I was so confused because it wasn't laid out where it was understood. Like, they just assumed you understood them and knew them. And I would be so confused.
Yeah, I'm the same way. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, obviously, if you're a parent raising an autistic kid, that can be super frustrating. And I feel it. Like I feel for you. You know what I mean? Like, and there's stuff you can do, but just know that like all is not lost, and that there's plenty of places in life where not knowing that rules exist is great, because that's how you start to be super creative and invent something new. You know what I mean? And that's how people become really successful a lot of times, is because they don't play by the rules in a good way, and they come up with a creative solution to something in the world. So yeah, it's just a matter of channeling it in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and I think it's important to have someone to look up to who's like I always loved having a mentor who I could talk to about things, who's like, I had already been there. Someone like besides your parents that you could talk to.
Oh yeah, it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge.
So like having, even if it's like not a person you can talk to, like a movie or a celebrity who is similar to you, you could be like, well, I can do something great one day because they've done it. That is important. And so I think that we should be more open with topics like this, like autism and like being gay and like all those kind of experiences. So I'm really glad we were able to talk about all these things.
Me too. Of course. Thank you. And yeah, like most of my mentors are long dead, or people that I, I've never been able to talk to at this point in my life. Like Elon Musk, seriously. Or Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon and currently richest person in the world. Same thing with him. I've read his biography. Sounds pretty autistic. Watched some interviews with him. Seems pretty autistic. Richest dude in history. You know what I mean? So it's super important, honestly. It's really important to take a look at that. And yeah, read some biographies. And for a lot of folks out there who might be on the spectrum who are looking for role models, seriously, look in entrepreneurship. Look at people who have started businesses, because a lot of them sound pretty autistic. Like, you're probably not going to find the mentor, the role model in the corporate 9-to-5 job, because guess what? We don't really gravitate towards corporate 9-to-5 jobs, and that's cool. You know what I mean? But you're probably going to find them in art or in entrepreneurship or some sort of a creative thing. And trust me, there's plenty of great role models out there. And it's so important, super important.
Mm-hmm. So we're about hitting 8 o'clock. So if anyone has any last questions, we'll get to them. So please leave them below. Is there anything else you wanted to get out before we finish?
Just again, this idea that it's really hard for an autistic person to connect with their sexuality. And I think that that's so important, because it's something that people just don't know. Thankfully, the conversation about sexuality in general is more open, and that we now understand that, hey, there's nothing wrong with being gay or asexual or whatever. It's all just, life. And so thankfully, the conversation has shifted in that direction. But I think it needs to shift even more to an understanding that, again, it's just that it's possible, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Like again, I married a woman. I had the ceremony. There are hundreds of people.
How many years were you with her?
We're still married, actually, but we're just separated. But we were together for 3 years before we ever knew. Yeah, 3 years before I ever realized I was gay. And now it's about almost 4.5 since I've known I'm gay now for like a little over about 1.5 years now. And we've been separated, but she lives, like, we're still best friends. She just lives in another city about 2 hours away. And but I still see her pretty, like, almost every weekend. But yeah, so I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is this idea that, like, it's possible for a autistic person to not know that they're gay or asexual or whatever, to the point where they will marry the person that they're supposed to marry. You know what I mean? Like, that was my experience. Like, yeah. So I just feel like it's super important.
So we got a question. Has anyone ever felt not of this time, like born in the wrong time? If I'm understanding this young man speaking. This young man speaking is Paul.
Yeah, I've had that feeling too. And it goes down to a further conception about time itself. And now we'll end on a hippie woo-woo rabbit hole. But this whole idea that, like, all of time is now. Like, the only thing that exists is right now, right? So history and the future, it's all happening at once, effectively. So if you feel like you're born at the wrong time, I've always thought, like, maybe you're a gift. Maybe you've transcended, you've shifted through the dimensions, right? So if all of time is happening now, that you exist at a time, like, where you are more resonant with those other dimensional times that are also happening right now in this moment. So maybe you have a message. Maybe you're a messenger from the future or from the past, and you've somehow been able to transition into this dimension particularly. But maybe that's a gift. Maybe you have some very special information for this world.
I definitely connect with the 80s just because of color and fashion. But I don't think I could survive living in the 80s. So I like, there's a lot of ways you can go with this question, but, like, I love how today, like, we can take different aspects we love from different times, different ideas, and apply it today, where that wasn't always possible. And so we're able to say, well, I like this idea from this time, and so I'm going to apply that to my life. Where, like, there have been times in history where, like, this is your role and this is what you have to do, and where now we can look back and go, here's all, like, this is what I like from history and this is what I don't, and I'm going to apply it to my life, and you don't have to apply that to your life. And I can even change things and do things we haven't done before if you want to question even further. And I think like being on the spectrum, you do question things more. Like I definitely felt that where like in class, I've had more questions about how the classes run itself and that kind of stuff, and asked the teacher about that. Where like the other kids are like, just this is how it is, and so you definitely understand like not fitting in. I don't know if I necessarily connect with this isn't the time I'm supposed to live in.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's a common feeling though, this feeling of not fitting in.
yeah.
And yeah, again, like I've had to find my tribe, my people that I do fit in with. You know what I mean? And that's cool too. Like
Everyone
what,
has someone out there.
oh yeah, for sure. There's a lot of people out there. It's just a matter that, again, understanding that if you're not connecting with the people around you, that they're out there, they really are. You know, I don't connect with most of the people who gravitate towards like a 9-to-5 job. Like it's not really my people. I like hanging out with other entrepreneurial folks. Those are my people.
All right. So thank you for joining me, Paul.
Thank you.
All for listening and all your wonderful comments. I love answering your questions and hearing what you guys have to say. Come back next week. We're gonna have Ian and Newton join us again. Hopefully the live stream will work this time. And we're gonna talk about the book that my face is on, Asperger's, Autism, and You. It's really cool that there's a book about autism written by someone on the spectrum. Check out the website, OurTism.com, for more of my writing. I write a blog about living on the spectrum. There's a support group meeting tomorrow for parents. All that's located on the website. Check out Life Map. It's amazing. It's our individual coaching program where you can go and figure out what your goals are and how to achieve them. And I'm a client of that, and I love it. It's helped me run this live stream at times when it's been difficult. Thank you guys for watching. If Paul, you want to promote your podcast.
Yeah, if you want to learn more about me, go to beyondhomosapien.com or just look up the Beyond Homo Sapien podcast on iTunes or Spotify or on YouTube. It's also on YouTube as well. So I'll put some links below where people can find it.
All right. Thank you guys for watching. Stay colorful.